Hello Internet, welcome to the channel. My name is Frankie and in today's video we are going to be building a beautiful enclosure for the Indian rhinoceros and the wild water buffalo. So from the get-go for this build I had a bit of a vision. I knew something that I wanted to be part of this enclosure, and that is to have an elevated platform that our visitors can use as a viewing gallery. This would be in the enclosure, meaning that it can supply a covered area that the animals could use as their hard shelter. They'd be able to sleep underneath it, whilst allowing our guests a closer than usual look at our animals. However, if you've been playing Planet Zoo for any amount of time, you will know that the absolute bane of our existence is the pathing system. I haven't built a raised platform in this fashion before, and as you can see it took a lot of experimenting. To begin with, I just tried to set out the basic footprint for it on the ground using the grid system and then try and raise it off the floor, but obviously that wouldn't work. So instead I tried to build it at a raised level, and for some reason you can't just start building in midair then build up to it. This is something that I discovered after quite a reasonable amount of time. I was getting very frustrated, but in order to build a raised platform I had to start building the path that the visitors were going to use to get to this area. Then I could build a set of stairs from that path, and from the top of the stairs I could then build the platform. It was a bit of a finicky way of doing it, but it's the only way that I could figure out. So maybe cut out all of this kind of tomfoolery at the beginning if you're going to do it yourself. Just skip ahead and build from a set of stairs. Once I was actually happy with the shape of this platform, it was time to decorate it a little bit. I'm not going to go mad, I just didn't like the concrete bottom of this platform. Given it's a nice wooden flooring, I wanted it to have a little bit of that on the sides as well. So the first thing that I did is selected some big wooden pillars that I could use as support structures to actually be holding this up. Because at the moment, the only way that this platform is in the air is from where it connects to the actual stairs. Other than that, it's floating, which is magical, but I wanted to add some pillars just to actually suggest proper support. Then, using various length planks, I start to mask some of the concrete on the edge. I don't go mad, I could have definitely put in a lot more effort and covered all of the concrete, but I kind of liked that there was a couple different textures going on, rather than just being all wood or all concrete. We had a bit of half and half. And once I'd set out a few planks, it was just a matter of duplicating and using the advanced move tools to get them into place nice and quick, and before you knew it I had a nice covered platform. And once the platform was done, I started to jump into the terrain alterations. I was pretty happy with the shape of our platform, so I thought I would start to actually bring this enclosure to life, making it look a bit more like a home for the animals. And this is also something that I had in mind beforehand, that I wanted to have a risen back area that comes down sloping towards the platform, and then have a even more recessed area where we're going to fill it with water, have like a tiny little lake stream kind of thing at the front. Something that I quite liked about the idea of having this risen area at the back is that suddenly all the animals are going to be at eye level. When you're on a platform, most of the time you're going to be seeing the animals below you because they're going to be placing the feeders and their sleeping area down there. However, by then adding a risen area at the back, it's going to be closer to eye level, making you feel like you're more in the enclosure. It's just a bit more immersive. In terms of how I'm actually marking out where I want the risen area to be, all I did was use the raise terrain tool in a select area, got it to a height that I was happy with, and then used flatten to terrain on that height to try and kind of sketch out where we want our risen areas to be. I prefer to have a ready-made structure or lump of earth, kind of like a sculpture using clay. Starting from a solid object, I then like to chip away at it. So I started to use the push tool to get us some nice recesses in the ground, and I used the flatten to surface once I had a nice angle in order to make a nice even slope for our animals to walk up and down in order to get to this risen area. When it came to placing our water source at the front, I did basically the same technique I used to get the height that I wanted. I used the push tool this time rather than pull, and then I used flatten to foundation to create a nice indent where we're going to be having our water source. Like I said before, I want it to be a kind of stream lake sort of thing. It's going to snake around the front, and it will have a nice open area in the corner for the animals to actually swim about in a bit more. And when our water source is a shape that I want it to be, I just use the push tool to start to smooth out the edges a little bit, because we still need our animals to be able to climb out, because at the moment it's quite a steep kind of slope at the edges, meaning that our animals will struggle to get out of the water source to then walk on land. So I go around using the push tool to get a bit more of a even slope, and then I will use the smooth tool just to get rid of some of the rougher edges on the edge of the water hole. When it comes to placing the barrier for this enclosure, I simply use the red brick tool with the curved edges on, because I wanted to have it be a bit more fluid than the elephant enclosure. Whilst I do like how the elephant enclosure turned out, I'm not overly fond of it being so square. It is something that I'm considering going back to change. So I wanted this one to have rounder edges and a bit more life to the shape of the enclosure. It's still basically square, but having these curves and kind of, I don't know, the dips and rises in the shape of the wall, it just helps to breathe a little bit of life into it and make it seem a little less stagnant. With the walls in place, I could use some large rocks and boulders to sink them into the edges of the raised platform, making it look more like a naturally risen cliff face kind of thing. If it was just dirt, it looks a bit strange, overly smooth. This adds a lot of texture and some interesting shape to the edges of these raised platforms that I've been creating. So to start with, I just use really large rocks with random rotate on, and I cover the vast majority of the open face of earth, and then I will go back in afterwards with some smaller rocks to start to fill in the gap to add a bit of variation in size. Don't be afraid to have them sticking out the top of the platform as well, as rocks above will help to sell this effect and make them look a little less out of place. I do also add a few small outcroppings of rocks just randomly amongst the dirt on top of this risen platform, just to add a bit of variation. It's something I always do in my enclosures. I love to lay down a large blanket of foliage, but having these rocks just helps to introduce a different type of texture and adds a bit of variation in a different way. And with that in mind, to break up this large grassy corner down on the base layer, or the ground level is a better term for that, I guess. I also make a small rock outcrop there as well for, again, a bit of tonal variation, a bit of variation in texture, and just to play about with height levels and stuff. I just love these little rock outcrops, they're just so cool. As per usual, the next step is to get our animals in, then go over to their terrain tab so that we can look at the terrain distribution needs and start to make adjustments accordingly. Luckily, the Indian rhinoceros and the wild water buffalo have pretty similar needs, as they come from very similar places. So I'm able to make adjustments for one animal and them kind of match up for the other. And now it's on to my favourite bit, and that is to completely cover this enclosure with plant life. And I decided to stick with a specific type of tree for this enclosure, and that's the Aleppo pine tree. It hasn't really been used in the rest of the zoo, so I think it's going to be good to kind of set this enclosure apart a little bit. The main tree for this enclosure is going to be this, but at the end I do decide to add some weeping willows as a little bit of fun. I haven't used those trees before, so it adds a real character to this enclosure. Now, I'm not going to talk all the way through this, you know the deal. I'm going to use lots of bushes and plants and stuff to get a decent ground covering and add a nice amount of colour. I'm going to pop this in time lapse, so sit back and enjoy. With all the plants in the habitat, I think this enclosure's really come to life. And now I can move on to one of the last parts of any of these processes, and that is to add the more quality of life items for our animals. And to do that, I go over to the habitat tab, and then in the filters I select the two species that are going to be in here, and that's the Indian Rhinoceros and the wild water buffalo. I can then start to place their enrichment items all around the enclosure, and most importantly I'm going to lay down a bunch of leaves and hay underneath this raised platform. This is going to serve as their hard shelter, meaning they're going to sleep underneath that. When placing their enrichment items, I try to keep all of the food-centric ones to the front of the enclosure. This means that the keeper is going to have to move a lot less in order to fulfill all of the needs that these animals have in terms of filling up their food enrichment items, and 2, the guests are going to get to see a lot more of the animals because they'll be staying closer to their food sources. However, I do then decide to place all of the toy enrichment items up the back on the raised platform. and you may think that they're not really going to go up there because all the food's at the front. But I do often find, after having built this, I do often find the wild water buffalo up there playing with a lot of the toys. And with these final bits and pieces done, this habitat was complete and I could allow my animals to enjoy their new home. And enjoy it they did, because they had babies in no time at all. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, maybe consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel to see more videos in this Little Asia series. We are now coming to the tail end of it, as I wanted to keep this quite a small series that focuses mainly on animal habitats and enclosures. The next franchise mode series will look more at actually building a good infrastructure for our zoo, making the guest areas really pop and have it look more like a place you'd actually expect to visit in real life, rather than just wonderful enclosures for the animals, which will of course continue in the next series. Thank you for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.